Is that good? It's a good way to start the stream.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I
can hold it.
We need to get a little
little
table for you
Yeah.
off to the side. We have those TV table things, TV tray tables or whatever they're called.
Might be a little. It would still be like, Actually, laundry baskets work pretty well. That's what I used last time, but you're using like 3 in here.
Well, that one I just used to carry some things up, but that one belongs to the boys. But those tall ones, they don't hold up as well. Welcome to In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. This is the pre-show. It's really that big one. That big one is the best. Makes the best table when you turn it upside down. I'm going to get a table real quick. You keep people entertained.
It's fine.
No,
I don't know how to entertain people.
Just, tell a story or something. Isn't that what you do?
I'm not a good oral storyteller. Like I think it's because I am too much of a perfectionist. So my stories when whoa, sorry, that was a table. That was not anything but a table.
Just this.
Is
that an okay spot for it?
So when I'm unless you knock it over and then I get hot tea all over my feet.
No, it'll be fine.
When I'm doing my stories, they do not come out perfectly. It doesn't matter like how long I brainstorm or how much I think about it before I actually start the writing. So there's something with oral storytelling that just feels like too much pressure to me. And I just don't do it very well. Well, and I think there's also pressure that you feel as an author, like you should be able to tell the story, when we're telling the boys stories about when we were kids, I always feel like yours are better than mine. And I feel pressure because I need to make mine better than yours because I'm the one who's an author, a storyteller,
Yeah. Well,
but it doesn't work out loud to me.
The thing that's easier about those kinds of stories that I'm telling is they're based in reality, and those
then
stories
you just exaggerate a little.
Yeah, those stories are already like they're a little bit interesting. But then if I exaggerate, it kind of becomes a game. It's like I add extra stuff, and the boys have to figure out, okay, what was, especially when they were little, it was like when they believed in more fantastical things.
They thought it was funny. But I think that's the thing though, is that when I'm telling a story, it's usually like the bare bones. And I don't add exaggeration on the fly.
Yeah, you do that.
Like I think about it and I do it purposefully. It's almost like I'd have to craft the story before I told it out loud. All
right. This is actually perfect for what we're talking about today, so I think we should just jump into the episode.
Oh, okay.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
I still haven't written anything down, but for the intro. So I'm going to have to wing it again.
Every week he says he's going to do it.
I will say this real quick cuz I don't think I'm going to say this during the show, but for those of you who are watching, I made a commitment on my channel to upload or to publish something on my channel once a week for 2 years, and I broke that last week.
Oh no.
Yeah, I had a plan for making for publishing a video kind of recap of the conference experience. So I'm still going to do that. I broke the rhythm, but I still think what I'm shooting for at the very least is having the total number be, whatever that is, 104 for 2 years. So I think we'll get there. And I'm going to publish a recap video from the conference, maybe a couple, because there were some really great talks that I got a lot of stuff out of, but there were a ton of great conversations too. And I feel like those are kind of two different things, like two different kinds of inspiration or value or whatever. So,
yeah.
All right, let's start the intro. Here we go. Welcome to In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. I'm Ben.
And I'm Rachel.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen or to watch if you're watching our live stream. This podcast exists to be an encouragement and a motivator for other creators. We speak from our own experiences as full-time creators who work from home and are trying to balance our creative passion with raising a family. So hopefully, listening to us, you feel inspired and a little bit less alone in your own struggles as a creator. Today, we are talking about inspiration. And specifically, we're kind of talking about this idea of, as a creator, do you wait for inspiration to strike before you get into your work? Or do you start your work and trust that inspiration is going to come in? And as with many of these topics, I think the interesting part is in the nuance of that conversation, kind of the two sides of that coin. And so that's kind of what we hope to bring to the conversation. But I think I know the answer to this, but what's your, what is your take on, do you wait for inspiration to strike, or do you just do the work and you trust that inspiration is going to come?
Well, I'm sure everybody who has listened to any of these can probably answer for me, but I don't wait for inspiration to strike, because I think that the inspiration that we want comes in actually sitting. We call it in writing, we call it butt in chair, but I use a standing desk, so I can't really say that. But it's in the doing of the work that the best inspiration comes. Although I will say, taking time away from work can also grant us some good inspiration, but just don't wait for that to happen is what I live by, because there's no, I don't know, maybe it's because I need more structure in my life and my day. But I'm not a fly by the seat of my pants kind of person, and just being like, I'm just gonna, do whatever until inspiration strikes. I feel like I would never get anything done.
Yeah, when I think about inspiration, kind of in the context of this conversation, I'm thinking specifically about I don't know, it's kind of a mix of motivation, because inspiration, I think, has this kind of effect of pulling you toward the end of a project. Like you have a vision for what it's going to look like, and so it kind of draws you toward it. And then there's also just like the idea side of inspiration, like having an idea, having an epiphany, versus sitting down and sitting down with the question of, what am I going to write, or what am I going to create? And so it's been kind of an interesting, I feel like I have a mix of both right now in my life. I used to be very much on the side of like, I'm just going to
just wait until,
like if I don't have an idea that I'm really excited about, then I didn't really have it worked out in my schedule where like I'm going to sit down and produce something anyway. But at the same time, like I always did come to the page or to the screen with the belief that something would come to mind. So often cases, my experience was like, I knew I was going to start working on something, and I knew that somewhere in my subconscious, there was some kind of inspiration or some kind of idea that would jump out at me. Nowadays, I actually have, like, I have these times when I know, like, I'm always going to be working during these times. I'm on a schedule that, I have to produce things.
mm-hmm.
And so in some ways, it's like, it's not just that I trust that ideas will come. It's that like, they have to, yeah. And so if they don't, it's like, I'm stuck. And so over the past several years of operating that way, I've not really encountered many instances where I haven't had something to draw from.
Can I say two things, or
Sure.
are you finished with your?
Well, I was going to say this as the last thing, because I talked about this in the last episode. There was that, I had that kind of last minute idea, and I find that those are two different kinds of experiences, because sometimes I will get that kind of like lightning bolt sort of experience of inspiration where there's this electricity and this urgency behind making something that's in my head come to life. And so I feel like those are two different things, but I like the idea of making room for both.
Right. Yeah. I absolutely agree that there are moments of, that inspiration that happens or an idea strikes us. And I've had those in my creative journey. The one thing I will say about doing the work, excuse me, doing the work more consistently is that if you're not doing the work consistently, your brain does amazing things when you step away from creative work. So if you're in the work consistently and you step away, your brain is constantly thinking about that. So if I know that I'm going to write for 4 hours every day, even in those other 20 hours during the day, even when I'm sleeping sometimes, my brain is constantly working out whatever story I'm writing on or any of these ideas that I have. And so being actually in the work, even when we don't feel inspiration, is a great way to get our brain to come up with inspiration, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So this example that I've used of this recent project that I did where it was really last minute, I come away from that project with some questions. So I know what I was able to do. I really enjoyed that experience, that kind of urgency, and almost like there was kind of this drama about it. It's like, am I going to get it done in time?
Yeah. I don't
and
work well under this.
Yeah, so there's something kind of exciting and energizing about that for me. And the constraints that I was working within led to some creative solutions that I'm not sure I would have, had I had more time, I'm not sure I would have arrived at. Now, at the same time, I think back to that experience and I wonder, okay, if I had had that idea 2 weeks earlier, I know some things I would have done differently.
Right.
What more could I have done? How much better could it have been? And it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't closed off to ideas. It was one of those things that it just kind of like struck me at that moment in time. But I do have the question, like what can I do? What kind of practice can I have, or mindset or habit that would allow those kinds of ideas to strike me a little bit earlier, so that I have a little bit more time. I think a big part of it is an openness. I think a big part of it is a belief that those kinds of ideas can come to you if you allow them to.
There's also value in not dismissing those ideas, as silly as they may seem at the time, which is, that's a practice that I try to incorporate when ideas come. Like I was telling you about a really ridiculous dream I had last night, and I'm probably going to write it down as a potential story idea just because who knows, who knows? And
you said in that dream, you said I had a sister wife?
It's some term like that, but yeah, like a second wife who was supposed to be like sisters with me,
That is
it's
weird.
Very strange.
It's very
right?
weird.
Yeah. So who knows? I may never write anything about that ever, but I think what our brains want to know is that we're open to those ridiculous solutions to problems or ridiculous videos that we can't possibly make in 3 hours or whatever, you know?
Yeah. That was a big thing is, well, and it's happened to me a couple of times. I was under deadline for something and I had a big idea. And when I get a big idea for something like that other people in the company have a stake in, I know I need to bring it to them first, but before I can bring it to them, there's some work that I need to do on that idea to get it to a place where I can share the vision that I have. Because sometimes, you know, like if you just said, "Oh, this was the dream I had," and that's an idea for a story, it's like, okay, I need more than that to be convinced that that's a viable project. So it's kind of a balance between like, okay, do I spend the time working out, like at least trying to get it to a place where I can share my vision, or in the case of this most recent project, I wrestled with it probably for a good 2 to 3 hours before I actually got started because I wasn't sure I was going to have enough time. And that actually ended up costing me some time because of that, like, because I was, so it really, I don't know the answer to that either, because I feel like, especially if you're working under deadline, like whether you work for a company or you're doing your own thing and you're publishing weekly and, you know, like I have to send this newsletter by Wednesday, or I need to release this video by Thursday, whatever it is. And it's something, you know, like it can't wait another week. It wouldn't be as relevant, or for whatever reason, you know, you have to make those calculations sometimes like in a very short span of time. And that's where I'm like, I really want to figure out how do I get those sparks of inspiration earlier in the process.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if, I mean,
let me pause real quick, and then I'll come back. I'm just going to check on the boys.
Oh, okay. We heard them come upstairs, but who knows what they're doing.
All right, thanks, folks.
Yeah, I wasn't really saying anything.
So I was just I had just said I'd like for inspiration to strike me earlier in the process, and I'm not quite sure how to do that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure either. I wonder if sometimes planning could be a little better. So I know for you have actual, well, I guess you don't really have actual topics that you're going to be looking at, but you did know about this thing happening, and you knew about it well in advance, right?
Yeah. So I think in this case, there were other projects that were in front of me.
Yeah.
Before the release of with Podia, by the way, not a sponsored mention, but Podia just introduced a free plan, which is exciting. You can get a free website and a free community, and you can sell a digital download or and a coaching product. So like you can do all of that without having to pay a monthly fee, which is a huge deal. So this was a big marketing push. And so we knew about it pretty far ahead of time.
But you had other things that were coming up before then.
Yeah, so I had other projects that were happening leading up to that. And I think what I need to I think what could have helped is because I didn't really ask the question like what's something fun or interesting I could do to highlight this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I really asked that question until like the week that we were going to be producing all of
all of this
the
stuff,
launch
right?
materials.
So maybe prioritization in, not that it takes precedence over other projects, but it's at least running in the background. I find that things
Right.
that are running in the background tend to have some of the best ideas come up in my creative life, you know?
Yeah, and certainly I think that is something that was happening. I think from the moment we knew that we were going to be talking about this
Mm-hmm.
and creating marketing assets, my brain was already working on stuff. But part of what gives the brain like more resources, I think, is just like asking those questions and like I don't know. It seems like such a weird thing, and I wish there was some like solid scientific basis I could cite for how this works. But it's almost like you're telling your brain to give something some attention, and then your brain is like, okay, I'm going to allocate some X amount of resources for working on this problem in the background that way. And at any time, the brain will like say, hey, I've been working on this for 24 hours now. This is what I've got.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a week or,
Yeah,
whatever it is
yeah.
that.
I think that's the one unpredictable thing is we don't really know,
Yeah.
which is kind of nice when you don't have the deadlines. Like it's more open-ended
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So,
But it's that intentional, um, permitting or instructing your brain
mm-hmm.
to point some resources toward thinking about those topics or whatever it is, and with the intention of getting some kind of idea from
Yeah.
that or some kind of inspiration.
I mean, there is some research that shows doing that before you go to sleep can help with, you know, it doesn't always work, of course, but
Yeah.
sometimes you can wake up with ideas and inspiration. You know, I used to actually keep a journal by my bed. It was just this little thing. And I would write down each night, here's what I want my brain to think about, you know. Not in those words, but I would just have the topic.
Yeah, I think that's a really practical thing that you can do. Like anytime you bring some kind of physical action to
Mm-hmm.
those ideas. So like literally writing down, okay, brain,
Yeah.
we are going to be doing, we're going to be covering this topic in 3
Yeah.
weeks. Get to work
Mm-hmm.
and report back to me,
Yeah.
Like that sounds silly.
Yeah, but your subconscious brain really does a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are times that I'll wake up and there's been, you know, sometimes I get notes back from my agent or I get notes back from my editor, and my brain is constantly working on that. And I feel like there's just a problem that I can't solve. And I wake up one morning and the problem is solved, you know,
Yeah.
because the brain has been constantly running. And sometimes it's for projects that aren't even like on the forefront, you know. They're just these other ones that have been running in the background where I'm frustrated because I can't figure out how to end this one part or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me the way that the brain can do that. So
Now I've had that experience before where there was a video I wanted to produce, or maybe like a series of videos that I wanted to produce for a friend of mine, as a part of her campaign. And so I offered to do this for free, and there was kind of an example out there that we were pointing to, but I had talked about wanting to approach it in a kind of unconventional way, do something that was a little bit more outside the box. And every time, this was, weeks before I needed to even start working on it, we had this discussion, and I did make time to think about it periodically leading up to it. And every time I sat down to think about it, it felt like there was nothing there.
Yeah.
And I think some of that had to do with, I felt a little bit intimidated. It was not in the normal wheelhouse of the kind of content I created. And so I wasn't necessarily speaking from my own experience, from my own expertise. And that was a pretty rough feeling. It was like, we got to a week before everything needed to be done.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have nothing. And so I just made like one video. It was very conventional.
Yeah.
It was still really good, but it wasn't that kind of
what
like
you wanted. Yeah.
And I wonder in some ways if I maybe put too much pressure on myself to do something creative.
I definitely think the psychology can really hold us back, especially when we feel, we started out talking about oral storytelling, and there's this like unspoken pressure that I should be the better storyteller because I write stories for a living, and there's just a pressure that comes into the brain, and you can still be creative when there's pressure, but your brain doesn't create as magnanimously. It's not as generous with its creative ideas when it feels like there's so much pressure, or that if it says a wrong answer, it's like when in school, if you said the wrong answer and people laughed, you didn't want to raise your hand again,
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the brain is, even though it belongs to us. That's kind of how the brain is. It's like, I'm not going to tell you again because you laughed last time,
Well, yeah. And this fear of saying the wrong thing, or in this case, like it was outside of my expertise. And so it was like, well, what if I do something that's creative and interesting, and that's the approach we take? And that was what I was pushing for.
Yeah.
And then
it doesn't work.
Like it doesn't yield the results that she wanted, and so you can tell I'm kind of deconstructing this in the moment, but looking back, I was the one that was pushing for something that was more outside the box and unconventional, and she was definitely open to that, but the example she shared was a more conventional, more simple thing, and I wonder if on some level I was like, well, if I do my version of it, and it doesn't give her the results she wants, then I'm responsible for it because of my approach. Whereas if I do,
so your brain just went ahead and shut it down.
Yeah, it's like no, we're not gonna. I'm not gonna take the risk of being wrong and failing. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And so I wonder looking back now, if I had created a scenario in my mind, at least, where it's like, you know what, there's no right or wrong answer here. And that is actually the reality of the situation. That was kind of the conversation we had. It was a lot of that fear of failure was all me. It was all internal.
Well, and that also goes back to openness too, right? Because if you're not open to even seeing results that you didn't want to see, then you're not really staying open, Yeah.
Well, and the nature of creative risks is that you may strike something that's so unique and interesting and resonant that like people get really excited about it, or it may be so unusual and unconventional that like people are like, what is that? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when you start, I don't know, I feel like when it comes to inspiration and the work of creativity, maybe this works differently for you, but if I let other people into that, it really dampens my creativity and the way that my brain can work. There's a quote from, I think it's Stephen King, who says, you write with the door shut until you're ready to let the door open and the world in. It's something like, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know exactly what but the gist of it is, you do your first bits of creative work, and for me that would be, probably the entire first draft, without like having people comment on it or anything like that, because you're just trying to get the creative brain working and getting this idea into something that's more than just an idea. And then once you have something in hand, you can take it to the world whenever you're ready,
Yeah.
So I think when we skip that process and we let people in before we're ready, the inspiration can just fall flat.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that kind of harkens back to that example I was giving of this big idea that I had, and I didn't want to share it with anybody until I knew that I could until I had something that I could share and a way that I could express my vision in a way that I knew would make sense to other people. Because in the earliest versions of those ideas, it really does sound like nonsense sometimes.
Yeah. I think in some ways I think in some ways I'm glad that I don't have to do that part of the process. Like, take an idea for a story to a person and say, do you think this is viable?
Yeah.
But
you
then
do,
I also,
you do that though. I mean, as a part of,
not usually until I've written the whole thing.
Right.
So I guess in some ways it can be good, because it could save me whatever, the 6 months of writing. But also I feel like I don't really know the story until completely. Even if I've brainstormed it really well, I don't really know it all until I've written the first draft, That kind of stinks, because what a waste of time if it's if it's a dud. I don't believe any of them are, forever duds. They can always be redeemed, but
yeah, that was the last episode. Is there such thing as a bad idea?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that also helps too, is the belief that any idea could be viable, maybe just not like version 1 of that idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you put that kind of pressure on yourself, like, oh, if this idea isn't perfect right out of the gate, then I can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that would keep you from all kinds of amazing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had ideas on I keep inspiration sheets, and each idea has a different piece of paper, but some of those ideas have been there for 5 or 6 years, and I've never gotten around to writing a story about it, but I don't know, maybe one day I will. I don't ever throw any of them away.
Yeah. I
would sometimes, I think sometimes about giving them away to other people so I could actually see it come to life, because I won't have time to, I have probably hundreds. I won't have time to get all those in my lifetime, But somebody, once I die, will find that folder and be like, this is a minefield of story ideas.
A gold mine.
Oh, a gold mine.
I think the gold mine is
gold mine.
Minefield.
Not a minefield. Some of them could be minefields.
These ideas are explosive. Yeah. I do, I think this is kind of similar to what you're just describing, is this idea that, there are these moments, even when you're like, you've got a full plate, you're working on other projects and you have plenty of work ahead of you, you still let inspiration in, you still let ideas in, and you have a way to capture those. And so for me, sometimes those ideas are really relevant to what we're focusing on, and I can implement them right away. And sometimes those ideas are things that I can't say yes to right away, but I'm still capturing in some way, so I know that I could eventually get to them.
Do you still capture them, or do you just let them fall away because you don't have time?
I do capture them.
Oh, okay.
So I have a system for capturing and holding on to ideas. And that's also, in some ways, that's kind of a test. If I'm really excited about an idea, I mean, I've done this recently too, where like I've had a plan, we have specific things that we have on the schedule, specific pieces of content, and I'll go to my manager and say, "Hey, I had this idea. I'm really excited about it." They can tell I've got a lot of energy for it and stuff. And I'm like, "Can we, shift the publishing schedule so that I can make room for this?" And a lot of times they'll say yes, which is fantastic. It's usually only when like there are really hard deadlines, like we're releasing a product update or something like that. But that's another thing that I think is useful for creators in general, is just having permission to shift things around. If you get an idea like that you feel very energized by, and that's like, I need to, like you feel that electricity, and it's like, oh, I got to get this out. But also like having a way to capture ideas and hold on to them so that you don't let them go. So you're not like, oh, that would be a great idea, and then you just forget about it. And later you're like, wait, what was that again?
Yeah, I totally agree. The capturing of ideas is really important, because I mean, there are times that I'll wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm sure most creative people talk about this, and you have an idea and you think, oh, I'll remember that in the morning. But you very rarely do actually remember it in the morning. So, it's the same for the things that strike us in the middle of the day. So I was going to say something in the middle of your talking, and I can't remember what it was now, but it was pretty profound.
You should have written it down.
I'm actually being serious. I don't know if it was profound, but I just can't remember what it was now. I'll probably think of it when you start talking again.
Yeah.
So I'll just
So let me start talking again. And no, I don't know that I really had much more to add. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So we talk about this idea of inspiration striking us. And I think part of that, I mean, it definitely is true. We can go on a walk, or there will just be this ringing of bells, not really ringing of bells, but this idea will come down. But I think part of that is also the capturing of ideas. So inspiration strikes, but it can also be referenced back to, if that makes sense, because you have a capturing of those ideas, and that can be considered inspiration strikes, because you're referencing back to those ideas, and you actually talked about feeling stuck sometimes, but that capturing of ideas can help us from feeling stuck too.
Yeah, it's like a well that you can draw from.
Yeah.
When you feel stuck. And I think that's probably the biggest, selling point for capturing ideas, for having a practice of doing that. Because I think most of us, if we leave ourselves open, and we are, we're focusing our mind on whatever it is our platform is about, or whatever our main topic is, we're going to encounter ideas probably more often than we're sharing ideas. And how you capture them. And this is one thing I need to improve on, is I'll get an idea. This happens a lot for this show. I'll get an idea for an episode topic, and I'll be like, oh, I need to write that down. And I it's like 5 or 6 words. And I go back to that later, and I'm like, what was that? Yeah. So there's, I think the habit that I need to develop is being just a little bit more descriptive about what that idea was.
Yeah.
so that I'm not left scratching my head later. And even still, like, the topic for today was,
should we wait for inspiration to strike, or?
well, no, it wasn't even that. It was 3 words. It was last minute idea,
Oh,
because it was based on this experience that I had with a project,
yeah.
but I don't remember what I had in mind
Yeah.
to talk about when I wrote those 3 words.
So you just took it in the direction you wanted.
Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I think I might have wanted to go in this direction, and
That's funny.
and so it made sense to me. So not that like having really short, title type ideas can't give you some inspiration,
Yeah.
but I feel like the more descriptive I am,
sure.
I get to the actual nature of what that inspiration and that idea was.
Yeah. Yeah, because last night, this is funny. Last night you told me, I asked you what the podcast was going to be about, and you said last minute ideas or planning. And so then when you started talking at the beginning of the podcast, I was like, that is not the topic I was thinking about. So your brain took it in a totally different direction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
but
interesting.
How delightful.
Mm-hmm.
I like this one better. So
yeah. I mean, this has been a really fun topic to discuss for sure.
So this would have been waiting for inspiration to strike.
Mm-hmm.
No, maybe not. No, we do the work every week except for last week.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, that's the title of this. The title of the stream is "Should You Wait for Inspiration?"
Yeah.
So that's the direction I took it, and that's what happens. Like I'll even have an idea of where I want to go, but because I'm having trouble summing it up in a title, sometimes it's kind of it's like I need to compress this idea into a title that I can turn into a thumbnail, And so sometimes in the process of compressing that idea, it takes on a slightly different trajectory.
Yeah.
So
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
We don't plan these, so we just wait for inspiration to strike while we're talking.
Yep.
But in general, we believe, or I believe, that you don't wait, you just work.
Yeah, and as per usual, I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, well,
I think it's definitely work, and then like
I'm still open.
Leave yourself open. Yeah.
Yeah. We're agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, good talk.
Yeah.
I think we're going to go ahead and leave it there for now. Thank you so much for listening or watching. If you're watching live, I see JD hanging out in the chat. Happy Friday. If you want to help us out, we have this podcast published on all of the major podcasting platforms now. So please leave a review and share this with other folks. That helps the show out immensely. You can also go to intheboatpodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter. And we'll let you know about any special events or anything like that. So I think that's it. Rachel, where can people go if they want to find you?
RachelTolson.com.
And I'm at BenTolson.com. And I'm also at Ben Tolson on all of the things. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
I didn't say anything at the end. See ya.
That's all right.
You have to splice it in.
Yeah, I can do that.
Wow, she doesn't even say bye to us.
Mm-hmm.
Just kidding.
So I'm having one of the things that we didn't really get into in this show, but this is affecting me more on the personal side of what I'm doing, because in my work for Podia, I've got a very clear focus. I know what I'm creating content for. I know the kinds of topics I'm going to cover. And that makes it a lot easier to come up with ideas because like I know the lane I'm working in. And on the personal side, I find it really challenging because I feel a lot of uncertainty about where I want to focus.
Yeah.
And what makes it a little bit easier for the podcast is, we have this kind of well-defined, and it's not even a narrow niche. It's like creators. And but even that broad demographic provides I'm going to say this again. Even that broad demographic provides a sense of like, oh, I can talk about X, Y, and Z because I know who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And on my like for my regular content, without having that well defined, it's just I don't get any ideas. And even though I know what I could talk about, I think because I'm like, oh, but I'm not sure who I'm trying to talk to, and so that complicates it.
Hard.
So I think that's a big piece of it. Is if you find that you're not getting inspiration, like you sit down to write, you don't know what to write about. I think some of that can come back to like, do you have enough clarity and focus in like who you're talking to or the types of topics you're trying to cover?
So one of the things that I remember doing back when I was doing a lot of more of the marketing stuff is, and I think this can help with capturing ideas, but just thinking about what your talents are and where that intersects what you're passionate about, and write down ideas. And then once you have the ideas, you figure out who the audience is, because you don't necessarily want to, I mean, maybe sometimes you do want to capture an audience and then try to come up with ideas for that. But I feel like that's kind of a recipe for work when it comes to creative life. And when I say work, I mean like it's not quite as soul giving, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I know what you're saying.
So I wonder if doing an exercise like that might help define the audience. Working sort of backwards from what traditional marketing says you should do.
Yeah.
If that might just spur some things.
So it's what you're passionate about
and what your talents and skills are and how those intersect, and then coming up with topics under that,
Yeah. I feel like the audience could be a part of that, but it's like you do it in that order. It's like, what are you passionate about first? Because that really has to do with like, oh, what can you what can you write about and like not get tired of?
Right, exactly.
And then what you're skilled in or have expertise in is important, because you don't want to just be like, giving people bad information.
Yeah, exactly.
And those two things I think can inform an audience, but you might have like, on the basis of those two things, you might still have a pretty broad audience that you could speak to. But the more narrow you are, so like within that audience, maybe, so for example, with I'm passionate about creating and reaching an audience. And really like the core of that is it's creativity. It's, I'm passionate about helping people. And a big part of where my skills lie are in video production, video marketing. And so that's still pretty broad. There are a lot of different types of creators who are trying to build something that helps people and trying to use a video to do that.
Yeah.
So like I could speak to all kinds of different audiences. But here pretty soon, I'm going to be focusing on making an online course for SaaS marketers or SaaS founders. So software as a service. So the kind of person who has is just starting out with a company like Podia. They've built some kind of software. They're trying to market it. They know that video is going to be an important piece of that. How do they, if they don't have any background in video whatsoever, how do they start using video as a marketing tool for their SaaS company? Or if they're a more established company, how do they build a strategy for using video for marketing their SaaS company? And so that's a pretty narrow audience. But before I got to that, I did have to identify those other two things. So I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. What if you did something about creating video on TikTok? I'm just kidding.
I'm not quite there yet.
Oh, there's a really big population called book talk. And people just talk about books and all that. And I have several friends. One of them's I think she's 70, and she's on TikTok because she does this book talk thing. And I'm just like, I just don't know if I can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very appreciative for having places like that, but I don't know.
Well, so the trick is you have to find songs or sounds that are trending, and then you have to do there was that my money don't jiggle jiggle. So there's a dance that you do with that, gosh. And you do the dance while you're talking about the books, using that sound, and that's how you go viral. So
okay.
So there you go, free TikTok lesson. I am just kidding. Don't use that. I have no idea what I'm talking about. In other news, I've heard that there are calls in Congress, I think, to have TikTok taken down because there are reports that they are sending data, or that foreign countries have access to the data. So it's
this is why don't be on social media.
Yeah, there's kind of an issue. Potential issue going on there.
Oh my gosh.
But anyways,
craziness.
Yeah, I'm not probably not getting into that world.
Yeah.
And when I say video marketing, I'm talking very specifically about YouTube. Yeah.
I know. I was just kidding.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.